The sharp, heavy sound of thick, formal paper turning echoed violently in the quiet room. On top of a rough, self-made plywood desk, a massive stack of stark white documents sat like a heavy anchor. Adam, the foreign partner, leaned forward in his immaculate tailored suit, his expensive pen hovering just above the dotted line. Across from him sat Alex, wearing a clean but deeply faded work shirt, his calloused hands resting flat on the wooden table. The physical contrast was jarring, and the tension in the small office was completely suffocating. Tuna stood silently in the corner, her breath caught in her throat. Her fingers tightly gripped a ceramic cup of green tea until her knuckles turned pale white. Her hands bore the tiny permanent scars of years spent peeling cassava and sorting rough acacia wood in the freezing midnight wind. This was it. This was the largest agricultural export contract their remote village had ever seen. If that pen moved, the lives of their entire family and the company would officially turn to a brilliant, solid new chapter. But if that pen hesitated, if the foreign market rejected their rural reality, the fragile hopes of dozens of farming families waiting outside would collapse. Hello everyone. We hope you are having a peaceful day and that the foundation of your home feels secure. But in today's story, the ultimate reward for years of silent struggle finally arrived, and it immediately threatened to overwhelm us entirely. The blue ink finally bled into the thick paper, locking in a massive international promise. Adam stood up, offering a firm, defining handshake that officially bridged the global market to their dusty yard. But as the heavy folder closed, Alex and Tuna shared a quiet, terrifying glance. The hardest part was not convincing the world to buy their harvest. The hardest part was realizing what they had just promised to deliver. The sleek black car rolled slowly out of the yard, leaving a thick cloud of dry, golden dust hanging heavily in the afternoon air. As the sound of the engine faded down the dirt road, the overwhelming reality of the signed contract settled over the wooden house. Alex walked out onto the porch, staring out at the expansive yard. High above the heavy bamboo gate, the small red light of their new security camera blinked steadily in the shadows. It was this exact transparency, the clear, undeniable proof of a clean and disciplined workspace that had finally won Adam's trust. But trust is a heavy burden to carry when you are no longer just feeding your own family. Beside the massive stacks of raw, unpeeled cassava waiting under the corrugated tin roof, little Henry's small wooden toy truck sat abandoned in the dirt. The toy looked incredibly small next to the towering mountains of agricultural raw materials that now legally belonged to a foreign market. Tuna walked up beside Alex, drying her hands on her faded apron. She didn't smile. She didn't celebrate. She simply looked at the sheer, intimidating volume of raw wood and root vegetables that now needed to be processed flawlessly. For generations, prosperity in this village was measured by having just enough rice in the ceramic jar to survive the rainy season. Now they were contractually obligated to deliver perfectly standardized, premium cassava flour and flawless wooden pallets to the other side of the world. There was no room for a single cracked board, no tolerance for a poorly sealed bag. Alex walked slowly toward the current packaging workshop, his heavy boots crunching against the dry earth. The space that had once felt so large and accommodating suddenly looked terrifyingly small. To meet the massive volume of this export deal, they would have to completely expand the workshop, double the workforce, and push their absolute physical limits. A better life is never handed over like a winning lottery ticket. It is an exhausting, demanding weight that you must voluntarily strap to your own back. As the afternoon sun cast long, dark shadows across the yard, Tuna picked up Henry's small toy from the dust. She brushed the dirt off its wheels with her scarred thumb, realizing that their quiet, manageable rural life was gone forever. The world was watching them now, and the pressure to not fail their village felt heavier than the mountains surrounding their home. The newly expanded packaging workshop smelled strongly of fresh industrial cardboard and hot adhesive glue. Dozens of local workers, eager to prove their worth and terrified of the massive deadline, moved with a frantic, nervous energy. They were packing the very first trial batch of premium cassava flour destined for the international shipment. The rhythm of the room was fast, far too fast. Tuna stood silently at the final inspection table, her dark eyes tracking the blur of hands and brown tape. She reached out and picked up the first completed export box as it slid down the wooden rollers. The flour inside was absolutely perfect, painstakingly sifted 3 times by the village elders until it was as fine as powdered snow. But the vessel holding it was a quiet disaster. Tuna ran her calloused thumb along the edge of the heavy cardboard. One corner was slightly crushed from being forced shut too quickly. The glossy export label, bearing the proud name of their family company, was tilted just a fraction of an inch to the left. A smudge of dirt, likely from a worker's hurried thumb, stained the pristine white background. For generations, the local traders at the provincial market had only cared about the weight of the sack. A crooked sticker or a dented box meant nothing to a buyer who haggled over pennies. But this was no longer the village market. Tuna raised her hand, signaling the floor manager. "Stop the line." The heavy packing machines powered down with a low mechanical whine. An eerie, uncomfortable silence instantly flooded the crowded room. The workers stopped wiping their sweating foreheads, looking at Tuna with deep, unspoken confusion. Why was the boss halting production over a tiny scratch on a piece of paper? Have you ever noticed how the biggest threat to a massive dream is rarely a giant catastrophe, but rather a tiny, ignored mistake that quietly becomes a habit? Tuna looked down at the ruined sample box, standing next to a mountain of perfectly refined flour, and realized a terrifying truth. A brilliant community story means absolutely nothing to the outside world if the final execution looks careless. The confrontation that followed was not loud. It was a terrifyingly quiet, unyielding shift in reality. Tuna placed the flawed box back onto the center of the wooden table. In front of 20 seasoned, hard-working village men and women, she slowly tore the expensive cardboard open. She deliberately destroyed the finished product, rejecting it completely in front of everyone. A low, anxious murmur rippled through the workshop. Destroying good packaging felt like a terrible sin to people who had spent their entire lives saving every scrap of material. But Tuna did not give a long corporate lecture. She let her physical actions carry the heavy weight of the lesson. She walked over to the stack of raw, unfolded export cartons. She picked one up and brought it back to the table under the harsh, bright inspection lights. Her hands, deeply scarred and rough from years of pulling stubborn cassava roots from the hard, sun-baked earth, began to move. They moved with a sudden, deliberate and delicate precision. She folded the thick cardboard corners sharply, pressing her weight into the creases to ensure they were flawlessly square. She carefully measured the clear packing tape, applying it slowly without a single wrinkle or trapped air bubble. Finally, she took the glossy export label, held her breath, and applied it mathematically straight. The finished box sat on the table. It was pristine. It looked like it belonged on the shelf of a high-end foreign supermarket, not in a dusty rural yard. The world outside this village does not know how hard we worked in the dirt, Tuna finally said, her voice soft but echoing in the quiet room. They will never see the late nights, or the sweat, or the struggles of our farmers. They only see this box. If we hand them a careless box, we are telling them our labor is cheap. She looked into the tired eyes of her neighbors. Refusing to cut corners is how we demand respect. From the shadows of the open doorway, completely unnoticed by the anxious workers, Adam stood silently watching. The foreign buyer had returned from his car to retrieve a forgotten document, only to witness this fierce, uncompromising protection of quality. He watched Tunar's calloused hands resting on the perfect box, and a slow, deep smile formed on his face. The true value of an international contract is never just the raw agricultural product. It is the relentless, exhausting care taken in the very last second of presentation. The hidden cost of demanding perfection from yourself is the deep, silent physical exhaustion that settles heavily into your bones long after the work is done. For weeks, the newly expanded workshop operated under a grueling, microscopic standard of discipline. Tunar's hands, already tired from the physical harvest in the fields, grew stiff and sore from personally inspecting thousands of identical, flawlessly folded cardboard cartons. The village workers had pushed through their own frustrations, learning the hard way that the international market forgives absolutely nothing. But as the very final wooden pallet of premium cassava flour was tightly wrapped and loaded onto the delivery trucks, the heavy burden of that strict discipline finally revealed its true, undeniable worth. Before Adam stepped into his waiting car to return to the bustling city, he stopped at the edge of the dusty yard. He didn't look at the massive stacks of export-ready goods. He didn't look at the expensive new security cameras. He walked directly over to Tunar. He offered a slow, deeply respectful nod, specifically praising the relentless, uncompromising quality control she had enforced on the factory floor. He recognized that the true anchor of this massive international operation was not the expensive machinery or the flawless raw materials. It was a rural mother refusing to let her community's hard labor be undervalued. The sweat resting on Tunar's brow suddenly didn't feel like the heavy mark of rural poverty anymore. It felt like the undeniable, hard-earned shine of global dignity. As the sleek black car finally disappeared down the long dirt road, a profound, overwhelming quiet returned to the wooden house. The heavy bamboo gates were closed, blocking out the noise of the outside world. Alex turned around in the middle of the empty, sunlit office, watching the golden afternoon light filter softly through the traditional bamboo blinds. He looked at Tunar, walking past the desks to pull her into a tight, deeply grounding hug. "We did it," he whispered into the quiet room, his voice thick with emotion. For the first time in years of silent struggle, Tunar finally let her heavy guard down. She buried her face against his shoulder, crying silent tears of pure, absolute relief. The physical transformation of their lives was sitting right there on the self-made plywood desk. The thick contract, bearing its formal signatures and bright red official stamps, was no longer just a terrifying promise. It was the physical proof that their family and their entire village were finally safe and secure. The deeper truth of building a family legacy is that true success is never just about escaping the hard dirt of the farm. It is about building a foundation of quality so unshakable that the world must eventually come to your own wooden gate to respect it. As little Henry ran out onto the porch, laughing happily as he chased a stray butterfly through the warm afternoon air, Alex held his wife tightly, softly wondering how they would manage the even bigger export orders that were inevitably coming their way. But for today, the wooden house was filled with healing warmth, and the heavy weight of the future finally felt like a beautiful blessing.